All right. Well, hey everybody. Welcome back to the Crux of the Matter. This is our fifth episode, and you might be able to guess if you're watching on video. You can't guess if you're watching on audio. But this episode is particularly special because we've got our first guests on today, Luke and Ryan from the Bold Truth podcast. So, how you guys doing?
Good. How are you doing?
We're chilling.
It's
We're
a
good.
Friday. It's a happy Friday.
It's a great day.
We're almost to finals.
Yeah,
Almost. Next week and then finals week after that.
Yep, and we're almost done. You'll probably the next time we do a podcast, it will be me and Landen doing it virtually over YouTube or something, which will be fun. Seeing if we can figure that out. But why don't you guys tell us a little bit about the Bold Truth podcast for our listeners who didn't heed my word and listen to our appearance.
Well, Ryan and I, we both really like philosophy. We also really like the Catholic faith. So we want to make a podcast where we can talk about both. And last year, Ryan made some philosophical comment about a story of his that included bowls. And so our philosophy teacher also used the term BS a lot. So when we first came up with the idea of our podcast, we were thinking something related to bowls. Well, BS, y'all know what that means. So let's flip that around and let's look at the bold truth of things instead of the BS of things. So we're looking at problems in society, what the culture wants to tell people that is blatant lies, and what the truthful thing actually is. So a lot of things related to that, and also to the Catholic faith. So
I just love origin stories. And you know something else that has an amazing origin story? The American Dream.
Great transition.
Great tie.
Yeah.
There it
And
is.
so it's a fun little known fact that in 1931, James Trunzo Adams, in his book, The Epic of America, he wrote that the American dream is that dream of a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement, end quote. And again, I doubt we all agree entirely with that quote, but that is the modern origin of that term coined in that book. And I think a lot of people think the American dream was kind of from the beginning of America, but really it didn't really originate until the midst of the Great Depression, and seeing that it was spurred as a result to saying what went wrong. And I think we see that increasingly in modern culture, especially with inflational fears and etc. We see this growing question of, is the American real? Is it truly just a dream? Is it something that should be strived for? All these questions and more, that will be covered in this podcast. And Riley, do you have anything to put?
Well, no. I mean, this podcast, The American Dream, that's where it comes from. People, I went to public school. A lot of you guys were smart and went to Catholic school, or at least
I went to public school too.
Yeah, you went to public school, so you know that people don't even know whether Abraham Lincoln was, the president during the Civil War and all this stuff, and people who think he helped sign the Declaration of Independence and all this embarrassing kind of man on the street stuff.
True fact.
But people convolute it a little
BS.
bit. Yeah,
That is BS.
yeah. People convolute it with the manifest destiny thing, where it's just trying to expand and everything, and we're God's country and my guns and my Constitution and everything, and that's not really specific enough. So there are different definitions of the American dream that we're gonna hit on today. That's the first one, and that's the origin of it. So I don't know. Since you guys are the guests, what do you think about that definition of the American dream? Do you agree with it? Do you think it's something to strive for?
Yeah, I mean it's a great thing to strive for. I mean this kind of parallels to just a lot of ideas of we have this amazing goal that a lot of times isn't attainable, but how the kind of the striving for that goal sometimes is the American dream. The same way in philosophy that we have an unattainable truth, a capital T truth that we wish to seek, but really the goal is the journey to attain that truth, and the little accomplishments we make, the little truths that we understand. So in that way, I mean, this is a very utopian idea to think about, but there are little goals we can achieve in this American dream, which is kind of I don't know. Did you say it last time? It's an American opportunity. Was that you that said that?
I don't know. I think you're giving me too much credit.
I don't know who that is, but I can't. I don't know if that was you that said that. But sometimes it's just we should look at it as an American opportunity. That's really what we're given here, and it's an opportunity, kind of an open future in which we can do so many different things and explore so many different things. And not that we'll ever truly reach that American dream and that American potential that we wish to seek, but a lot of times with that open future, we're able to just achieve little things on that journey.
Yeah, so seeing not the end goal, but the journey in itself can be the American dream.
Yeah.
Anything about you, Luke?
Yeah.
One thing that really prompts in my mind is that America must be this perfect place to go to. That's just also not true as well. There's like a large reality that no matter what people form a state, there's always going to be some sort of evil along the way, as we're all human. We've been wounded since original sin, and we carry that everywhere we go. We can't escape original sin. And so in that sense, it's something that isn't particular of the American dream. But one thing I do want to state is that there are a lot of opportunities in America, a lot of opportunities for new things. And I think a lot of times we try and seek newness just for the sake of progress towards something, which I think has also become mixed in with the American dream. So that's a lot of little bits on just the first things that come to my mind when I think about the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. A question of like this future innovation, but in that pursuit of innovation, do we lose some traditional or natural truths?
Right.
Kind of coming back to this is how much do people recognize the actual origin of the American dream versus today's perversion of it in our sense, which then kind of continues into the second definition, which is by the Smithsonian Magazine by an author, Sarah Churchwell, in which she states that the original American dream was not a dream of individual wealth. It was a dream of equality, justice, and democracy for the nation. The phrase was repurposed by each generation until the Cold War, when it became an argument for a consumer capitalist version of democracy. Our ideas about the American dream froze in the 1950s. Today, it doesn't occur to anybody that it could mean anything else. And so that was her opinion on the kind of perversion or maybe just the development of the American dream over time. Whether it truly froze in the 50s or not is up to debate. I think even more modern than that. It might just be more extreme of the same 1950s idea. But that's kind of the second definition. And before we kind of discuss that, I think I'll go into a third. Investopedia says, the American dream is the belief that anyone, regardless of where they are born or what class they're born into, can attain their own version of success in a society in which upward mobility is possible for everyone. So going to those two definitions.
Yeah, you got so the first one is a little bit more general, more vague. It's more of an ideal to strive for than specifics. But the second definition makes a couple very definite, hardcore historical statements that pick a side definitely. And so the second definition is saying equality, justice, and democracy, and then consumer capitalism, and then the third one is upward mobility. So those kind of ideas, wrestling with them. What do you guys think about that, particularly compared to the original definition? Do you think it's close to the mark, or it's consistent, or is there anything that's wrong about it to you? Is there anything that jumps out?
The first thing that comes to my mind is just that the original was the dream of equality, justice, and democracy for the nation. And I think back to some of the Enlightenment thoughts that the founding fathers of America had, coming from, and definitely enlightened. They were obviously Enlightenment thinkers in their thought, in what they wrote, in the development of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, everything about it, speaks Enlightenment. And I think in that way she's right that probably was the original American dream, is having something to do with the fact that the basic the rights that all people have in just being people, how there should be equality and justice. This isn't related to it, but the democracy notion. Yeah, it wasn't really democracy, but that's just
watch our episode 3.
Yeah.
What is a democracy?
Yeah, not America. But comparing that back to the previous definition, I think this probably retains more of the original intention of America and separating from England and having the ability for people who own land to be able to have a say in what happens with the government, to be able to develop a society that isn't strictly the king's. So that's definitely probably the original thing of the American dream, I'd say.
So highly individual nature, this free spirit.
Yeah.
I think particularly related to the equality and justice thing, like it's there in the American dream, but you can still see how they're constrained by their time. And aside from like the, only property owners can vote and everything, like John Locke, one of the people who was sort of the inspiration for much of the freedom of speech and freedom of religion, little bits and pieces that they were talking about the original 10 Amendments. John Locke said that there should be freedom of religion for everyone except for atheists who are prone. They're what did he say? That they're prone to degeneracy and they're not capable of recognizing the oaths and laws and promises that undergird all of human society.
Wow.
Which is interesting. So it's not like total equality.
Like it makes sense though, because like natural law being something that is definitely further developed within the Enlightenment, and those who know natural law have an understanding of a purpose behind everything and a purposer. And so if you're atheist, there's no purposer. Yeah. So natural law therefore wouldn't make sense.
Internet atheists, you don't just have me get mad.
Yeah, and I don't know. It seems that when I talk to people today about the American dream, it all comes and goes to money, pretty much. Like it's all about, oh well, I'm gonna go to America so I can make money and have a comfortable life. I kind of like in the third definition, the Investopedia one. It says where basically they can attain their own version of success in a society, which kind of like looks different for everyone. But I think freedom is obviously the main key to being able to define your own success and be able to work towards that success.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's also a disconnect from the old shame and honor culture that often defines which singular path you can pursue, for better or worse. I mean, there's, I think, some benefits to certain paths which have that traditional honor. And biblically, we can discuss later about that. But then also having the freedom to be able to act within the confines of the law also gives much more opportunity. And again, if opportunity is the name of the game here, the American dream is found in that third definition, I think, pretty well.
Yeah, and I think what you said about money, that sort of plays into the fourth definition, which George Carlin, famous comedian, is not like incredibly funny. I'm not like taking a hard stance on that. Like people can think he's funny or whatever. But yeah, he's very, very much known for his social commentary. And so were you going to summarize it?
So down into the fourth quote. Do you want to just read it?
Yeah, he said it's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. And so the way he pretty much boils it down to basically consumption and splitting society into obedient workers and critical thinkers. And so he doesn't think that he's always, one thing he's famous for in his comedy is talking about the elites and these people who are running all the media and everything. And it's like, but he basically believes that freedom is an illusion because there are two classes of society, which, there's sort of always two classes of society. There's always the idea of like total equality it's not going to be achievable like ever. And the only people who think it is are communists. And that's sort of the whole vision of Karl Marx's thing, where it's like a socialist government first, and then the government will sort of just fall away. And then after that, you're left with worldwide communism, which is there's no more government and everyone shares everything, and unicorns fart rainbows and everyone's happy. So, but like Aristotle says that he defines governments by oligarchy and democracy, where oligarchy is government by the rich and democracy is government by the poor. So he doesn't define it the same way we would. And so like the whole Carlin quote, like sort of tying it back in, what do you guys think about consumption? Is that the new American dream? Does it fit with the old definitions? And, I think the fourth question is pretty obvious, the answer to it. But, like, do you think it fits in with Christianity?
Ryan mentioned that a lot of people like come to America to have better success, to have better comfort. And that's, like, makes a more individualist nature. And in seeking comfort, like, they are going to become more individualistic. Like, if you seek comfort too much, you're going to seek comfort for yourself, which that's what we always want to avoid. And putting ourselves in a situation where we have room to grow, that only occurs when there's some sort of tension between you and whatever it is that you're pursuing. But when you're comfortable, there's none of that tension. There's no improvement. And I wonder if seeking, when people come here to seek the comfort, but they do fall asleep eventually if they receive at least some sort of comfort, or if they don't get that which they're looking for. They just become comfortable with the bad scenario that they're now in after having moved here with high expectations and not received what they expected. So there's definitely that aspect there too with the American dream of either becoming way too over individualized, way too comfortable, or comfortable with not receiving anything. So there's definitely a balance in there, and finding the right American dream so that you're not asleep, so that you're pursuing life freely choosing the good in all scenarios.
What do you think, Ryan? Do you think George Carlin is right? The American dream, they could be asleep to believe it?
It's a funny one. It's interesting. I mean, there's obviously danger in pure consumption. Like when you have everybody consuming, and consumption is going to be rooted in selfishness eventually, like what Luke was saying. And a society just doesn't work if everybody's consuming. There has to be people giving and going to action and, whatever. But there is beauty in the opportunity to consume different things and to be able to consume different opportunities and all these things. But it's just what Luke was saying. There's got to be a balance in everything in our lives and so many different things. But especially in a society of consumption, consumption's great for the opportunity, but you also have to create your own consumption a lot of times as well.
Yeah.
Because if starving leads to comfort, which leads to gluttony, or something else leads to another extreme, I mean, we have this kind of pitting the normal society's ease and then turning that and really just fueling the basic human desires of really wanting things to be easy. And the question is that something that should be wished upon? And when society doesn't make it easy, is there a disillusionment then in this new definition of the American dream? And then I think just tying back the first definition, just this dream of a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller, and there's opportunity for each to pursue things according to their ability or achievement, down to this Carlin quote under the consumeristic of the 60s and on, with now saying that because so many people can't achieve their idea of the American dream, it's now just completely a myth. It's kind of this chase. And so that begs the question then is, where do you as the audience stand on that spectrum of understanding the American dream, if it's even on that? Do you believe that it is some consumeristic goal to reach? Is it a journey like Ryan mentioned? Is it just this overall opportunity to be able to live according to your freedom granted here? Or is there something more?
I think something interesting is like action is required in this American dream from everybody. I just looked up this quote because I just remembered while we were talking about this, but this quote, which it looks like is from Michael Hopf, I guess, says, "Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times." And I think it's interesting if you go and look at, like after the Great Depression, like you're looking at American history and you see what times have created different types of people and what kind of a stage we're in right now, which I see, personally, I see weak people right now, like weak men and women that don't want to do anything and don't want to create action. But
silent quitting.
This is creating for hard times to come. If you're just looking at history and how it's worked through the different societies and different people, we got to be strong men and women that are, we're called to action, and we need to fight through those actions and try to create this this utopia that we were talking about earlier, where people are able to consume, but the consumption requires action from people as well.
Yeah, and I think it sort of plays into, like when we think of the American dream now, it sort of is a little bit like Carlin's. It's not quite the same. It's somewhere in between Carlin's definition and the original, but it's like the 2-story house, and it's filled with stuff, and the white picket fence, and you have a dog, and you have a family, and you're living in suburbia, and it's like a good paying job, and like being able to retire when you want. And is that really like something we should strive for, if that's the American dream? Because this is like trying to make it more specific than just sort of these ideas. Like, is wishing for that, is that the American dream, and should we wish for it?
I mean, it's really, not that it's a terrible thing, but it's kind of selfish. Like, the white picket fence to what? Like, block yourself out from society and the rest of America, and like be able to have your own little place to say like, this is mine, and the 2-story home.
One thing I was thinking about with this, a lot of people say coming from Italy or Spain or France, coming over to America, they came from the families where when you got old, you would live with your children, or like you'd have be a multi-generational household essentially. And I'm wondering, this might be a hasty generalization, but with people coming to America for the sake of their own success, their own individual wealth, and their own individual comforts, if that created this notion where you become separated from your family, because like I think fairly certain in America for the most part, the living with your older family members or younger family members when you get old has pretty much mostly phased out through all practices in the entire country. But so many people have ancestries that come from societies that do that and still do that to this day. So I wonder if that's something that shows in relations, like kind of secluding ourselves to our own little space, where it's like, no, we want to be seeking a society of virtue where we're all virtuous and we do this together, like we're philosophizing together right now. So
yeah, and I think that sort of plays into that quote that you said about good times creating weak men, weak creating hard times. I think I totally agree with you, Ryan, that there's a lot of weak men and women around our society right now. But part of the thing about weak men, the reason that they won't become strong men and go and change things, is because they're still wishing for those good times that they came out of. And that's sort of like, that's the 2-story house and the white picket fence and the dog and everything. That's everything like that. And it's like, you can't just wish for something to materialize. You have to do something about it for yourself. And I think America being the land of stuff is not that's not, like, we already sort of know. We haven't articulated it, but we know, like, immediately our first instinct is that's not quite right. That's not what we're looking for, you know?
Yeah. So. And after looking at these ideas of the American dream, I'm liking more and more just looking at it as the equality, justice, and then the republic. To replace that word.
The constitutional republic.
But like, in looking at that as a way of forming us towards virtue and forming us towards the truth that we're all called to seek.
And so I think I'm going to mention my first belief, that I believe the American dream is still a reality. And I'm curious what your 3 thoughts are before I explain my position more. And I think there's 3 different thought processes. Like, yes, it's a reality. 2, it's Carlin's definition. It's only a dream, never going to be attained. Or 3, it is only attained by sacrificing something that is, like, natural.
Define reality. By reality, you mean possibility?
So it's manifested. So say that I live the American dream, I can actually live it. Like, I can actually...
Sure, okay.
So reality in that we can still attain that. Even if it's a journey. Like, not a single attainment, but through that process.
Yeah, attaining. Yeah.
I think it's possible. Like, as far as capitalism goes, capitalism still works. It will do what it's good at doing, which is creating a lot of stuff. Capitalism is also inherently unstable. If you look at capitalism, it's always like this, up and down, because it's producing tons of stuff and it's creating a bunch of weak men who, produce a bunch of awful stuff, which not just has disastrous moral results, it also crashes the economy. And so Chesterton actually said this a long time ago.
The solution is the problem.
Yeah, this is sort of a good place to kind of throw it in there. But Chesterton said, we're just going to read it, it's a whole giant quote. "It cannot be too often repeated that what destroyed the family in the modern world was capitalism. No doubt it might have been communism if communism had ever a chance outside that semi-Mongolian wilderness where it actually flourishes. But so far as we are concerned, what has broken up households and encourages divorces and treated the old domestic virtues with more and more open contempt is the epoch and power of capitalism. It is capitalism that has forced a moral feud and a commercial competition between the sexes that has destroyed the influence of the parent in favor of the influence of the employer. It is capitalism that has forced a moral feud and a commercial competition between the sexes that has destroyed the influence of the parent in favor of the influence of the employer." Did I just read the same thing twice?
Yeah,
I think I did. The last bit. It is capitalism that has driven...
Emphasized.
Yeah, it is capitalism that has driven men from their homes to look for jobs, and that has forced them to live near their factories or their firms instead of near their families, which I think is sort of tied into the point you were making. And above all, it is capitalism that has encouraged, for commercial reasons, a parade of publicity and garish novelty, which is in its nature the death of all that was called dignity and modesty by our mothers and fathers.
And I would posit that, it works so well that it will appeal to the basic passions once you're able to actually be able to chase those. So I guess to mention as an example, say I want to retire young, then capitalism provides the means to be able to amass enough wealth and early enough to then have the means to be able to sustain yourself for the rest of your life. And then in that time off, you can then just appeal to your basic fleshly passions if you have no reference point or guidance through that to have that self-discipline. Whereas if you didn't live in a land where capitalism works so well, or where your financial system didn't work so well, you would be forced to work your life, not having the opportunity to even consider an alternative. And where I see the American dream being realized is, I think, returning back to the original quote, just this dream of a land which life should be better, richer, fuller. Very vague, other than richer. I mean, that's massive. But fuller and better. Fuller, I tend to take it from, personally, a religious standpoint. If it's fuller, then how do you find meaning? Go back to episode 4. We are meant to know God and let his love be known. So how do I make that full? Well, if the America that I grew up in gives me the chance to work hard and live among people who I can freely talk to, then I'm able to be given both those abilities in the same act. I'm not restricted to know God and keep my faith a secret. I'm not restricted to let others know about him. So, I mean, that covers the fuller part. The richer part, again, the Bible says in Matthew 6 that no one can serve two masters, God and money. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the value of money itself is bad. And I mean, there's a lot of nuance there. Then the last one, better. Better is really subjective in a sense that people consider it, but there's a natural, I think, understanding of what's better.
I think
if I'm to say living in a house versus a garbage dump, one's better.
One of them is better, but there was someone. It was going around the interwebs this week, and it was this guy talking about, he's some famous economist or something at this conference, and he's saying it's not greed that drives the world, it's envy, and it's not people looking for their own. It's not people looking for their own self-interest and trying to accumulate a lot of stuff. It's them comparing themselves to someone else. And so that kind of ties into some of these stats that we threw up. That one like really easy one. Life expectancy at birth in 1900 was 47.3 years. In 1990, it was 75.4. And you still have people who are discontented and still upset and down with this. You know, I think we can make good criticisms of capitalism as a system, but that doesn't mean that we have to go straight to socialism, because that doesn't work. There'll probably be a whole episode about that eventually one day. But you know, if people are getting richer and they're living longer lives in comparison to people in the past, but they're still comparing themselves to people who are living around them, like, oh man. You know, I live in this apartment and I have a car and I have a job that pays, I don't know, $19, $20 an hour. And like, you're upset with that when, you know, someone in Africa or China in a sweatshop is making 5 cents maybe a day.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Barely enough to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, that was so true with how it's run by envy. It seems like we just, like, if you were to live your life in a forest somewhere and had like what we had, but was never comparing yourselves, you'd be more than thrilled to have what you have, just because you're able to survive, function, you're able to, like if you're with people, you're able to help them with the resources you have and all sorts of things. We're given so many different opportunities to do all that stuff. But as soon as you see somebody else with more, you always want more. It's just human nature, really. Though we all wish to not do that, but it's always in the back of our head in a way.
For the class I'm in right now, I'm currently reading Paradise Lost and Paralandra by C.S. Lewis. And so one of the big things talked about in there is like the desire for something that you don't have. And so in Paralandra, C.S. Lewis puts it aptly. It's like the woman, she says, why would I want the fruit which I can't have when I have the fruit which I have, which already shows its goodness to me? When I receive the goodness of the fruit, what better goodness is there to think of but to relish in the joy of the goodness present to me? And so there's the innocence of just living in the goodness that you have and being thankful for that. And then later it talks about like, I'm most often surprised when it's a new goodness, that which I didn't even conceive of before, as being better than the previous. And I don't really look towards things being better because I know I'll always be surprised in one way or another. So.
Yeah, that's a good thing to strive for, and for like context, because Luke is really smart and not a lot of people have heard of that book, unfortunately. Like I think, like I said it on episode 4, you should read every C.S. Lewis book, all of them. But it's Paralandra is the second book in the Space Trilogy series, and so the first book he goes to this world, which is I think Mars or something. I can't remember the actual name of it.
Malacandra.
But it's like this old world, and it's towards the end, and it's a ton of these wise creatures that are talking to the main character, Ransom. But Paralandra is where he basically goes to a Garden of Eden type world where there's no sin yet, but he crashes with this other guy who's basically an analogy for the devil and Satan tempting Adam and Eve in the garden. And, you know, that quote comes from the innocent woman who hasn't sinned yet and has no conception of what evil is. And so, you know, why would I go striving after this other thing when I'm already good here? It's not so much, I think a lot of the problem with the American dream is seeking after happiness instead of joy and not being content.
Without giving, you know, all the ideas of envy and the capitalist thing that we were just talking about would not exist. Although it would exist because we're still sinful, but there would be less of it, obviously. And we would strive for God rather than money and status, popularity.
I think so.
All these things that can break down society, you know, hopefully they'd be avoided in our longing for God.
I think you do. The thing about God is that he's not going to he always fills you to overflowing, so you can't be like partially full of God and partially full of the world. You know, like he says, if you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. And so I think if we had a society full of people who are full on God, then we're not going to be obsessed with stupid things like celebrity gossip and, you know, who's going to spend the most money and get the best deal on Black Friday, trample each other at a Walmart. You guys.
Our chaplain at Carroll College here, Father Mark, just said in the homily this last week, he said, you can't follow God from a safe distance because, I don't know, what is it?
Following God from a safe distance is neither following
Him.
nor is it safe.
Exactly, yeah, that's what it was.